Hello everyone and welcome to the first in a brand new series of short videos from Crossover Technologies. I'm Mark Hopkins and I'm joined today by Phil Barnard.
Hi Mark.
Hi Phil, how are we doing?
Doing very well.
Excellent. For those of you who don't know, Phil is a partner at Golf Data Tech and chairman of Crossover Technologies. Now, every month we're going to be bringing you the latest numbers in golf retail in our new series called Crossover Caddy. Now, exciting times, we want to get you more involved, so again I'm going to talk to you about Twitter later on where we can see what your feedback and get some questions from you. But the idea is we want to make this as simple as possible, get you guys involved, make it easy for everybody to understand, okay? So, without further ado, what I'm going to do is basically ask as many questions as possible to this man here, all those horrible questions that you never had the chance to answer before, except for the one about the badger. Right, so the results are in for 2017, Phil, but why should I care?
Okay, well, understanding how the market's done obviously has a significant impact on your business planning, your business model for the next year. So it gives you the opportunity to benchmark your own business and know whether the things that you've tried or things that you haven't tried this year have been successful or not. So it's just a great health check indicator as to knowing what's going on in your business and outside.
Okay, so it sounds like it's going to be really helpful to actually go and find out some numbers of my own business before we go too much further.
Yeah, it'd be really useful if you had some analysis, general turnover figures, something like the sales analysis by product group would be a perfect report to be showing or using while we're discussing the numbers, so you can make comparisons with your shop versus the market.
Okay, and what are those key sort of numbers that we should be looking for?
Okay, so the first thing we're going to be looking at is just basically the total spend and how that's changed.
Okay, so what does that actually mean?
So total spend is purely the total amount of money that's gone through the till, i.e. how much the golfers have spent this year on golfing product.
Okay, and what other numbers are going to help?
We're also going to look at market mix, so we get an understanding of what products people have spent money on, because that changes year on year.
Okay, so things like bags, balls, gloves, etc.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you should probably pause the video and go back to your Xbox software, run off those key reports, and that'll help you prepare for the next part of this video. Okay, so we paused the video, you're back now hopefully, so let's get down and dirty. Where do we start, Phil?
Okay, well, let's look at the overall numbers from the Golf Data Set retail audit. We audited over 600 stores this year in our numbers, and the total value versus 2016 was actually up 8.9%.
8.9%, okay, so that sounds awesome. What does it actually mean?
It means that basically this year golfers or casual golfers, all types of golfers, spent roughly 9% more on golf product this year than they did over the same period in 2016.
So that sounds fantastic. The rest of the market's doing great. But I've got my report in front of me here, and my sales analysis is telling me, hold it, I'm not up by 8.9%. Maybe I've only made even, or maybe I've even done worse than the year before. Should I be panicking?
No, it's okay. I think the important thing is to understand why the market's done well. So it could be down to the fact that your market mix is different to the general market overall. So you may not sell very many items that have sold well in the market. So it's important to understand why your performance is different to the markets. And maybe, yes, you just haven't done as good a job this year as your peers have in the market. That's just the reality. It could be how it is.
So we can take the others and learn from what they're doing.
Exactly.
Okay. So it's 8.9% up, which is fantastic. So, but how does that actually break down? Give us some detail.
Well, if we look at the growth overall, there's break it down by the various categories we look at. There was actually growth in 15 out of 16 categories this year, which is obviously really positive. We saw increases in both value and volume, and in order to also get some of the growth, we're going to have to increase in ASP. So we actually saw 13 categories increase in ASP. We saw a drop off in 3 categories, but not too significantly. However, we did see some large gains in ASP in a couple of categories. We also saw that units sold dropped in 5 categories as well. So on average, more categories grew in units than didn't, and the ASP was up nearly uniformly across the board.
So those drops in the categories, what can we draw from that?
Generally, it's where golfers are not spending so much on the product this year. The spend does seem to move around year on year, so if you get consistent strong growth in one year from one category, that doesn't always carry on to the next year.
So let's say again, I'm looking at my numbers and I'm saying, yeah, I've noticed a drop in number of units as well. How does that affect what I do for this year, for 2018?
Well, we need to factor in some of the long-term trends. So although we've got an increase this year, a drop-off in some areas, we need to look at how it's worked over the last 3, 4, 5 years. Certainly we've seen a difference in behaviour in hardware to apparel. Hardware for the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen year-on-year decreases in irons, woods and putters. We've seen some fluctuations in wedges, whereas in the apparel side we've actually seen some growth in units.
Okay, so should that affect then my pre-books? I mean, ultimately not. We're coming into February, March time. It's getting busy. I've got lots of stuff coming through my door. Have I still got a chance to review all my pre-books that I maybe did, a few months ago?
Well, there's certain categories that you'll have ordered a long time ago and that may have turned up. There'll be certain categories you've ordered a long time ago that haven't turned up. There is every chance that you could affect your pre-books based on how the market's gone. We often hear people making changes to orders. It may be that you don't have enough of a product, but more likely than not, you may well have too much of a product. And it's important to remember that although the market is up in value 10%, that doesn't mean we're ordering 10% more items.
Right.
Because we need to factor in the ASP, average sales price.
So that all sounds very complicated, very difficult. What's my starting point? How do I know what the right amount of stock is for my business?
Okay, well, everyone's businesses are different, so the values are going to be different. So the key thing I'd look at is the stock turn. The stock turn is a really good indicator of business efficiency, and I do love a good stock turn number.
Sounds dirty. So what's the detail here? I mean, what the hell is a stock turn?
Well, fundamentally, a stock turn is the amount of times in a year that your level of stock that you currently have will be sold. So if you've got 10 in stock, on average you turn over 100, then you would be turning that item of stock over 10 times. If you had 1 in stock and you only sold it once a year, you'd be turning it over once. So it's something that relates both stock holding and sales performance.
So let's say I look at my numbers again, I see my stock turn report, which I obviously get from Xbox, and it says 1. Well, that doesn't sound so bad. Is it really that bad? Just because I bought it and I sold it. So surely that's fantastic. I've managed to sell that item.
Well, there's a couple of factors. A, you've got a load of cash tied up, which might not be fantastic, especially if it's not your cash. You have an overdraft. That's not great. The second thing is that you're buying products and it's sitting there for a long time, which typically means that the net result will, at some point, you'll have to discount it. It's much better to have less of a product in and sell it through and reorder stuff that's moving, as opposed to getting a whole load of stuff and not necessarily getting the right stuff that's moving. So it isn't good having a stock turn of 1. We really want to make sure we've got product that's coming in and out through the store and it's fresh and you've got the modern bits and pieces that people want.
So, okay, so not a stock turn of 1. What should I be looking for? What's the ideal stock turn?
Well, ideally, if we take anything from high street retail, being clothing or general sports goods, most people are operating at 3.5 to 4 in those sectors. So, 3.5 would be a great place to try and get your business to.
Okay, and that's across the board, is it?
No, different products categories will perform very differently. We've got some really quite fast turning stuff, and we've got some slow turning stuff, and you will have a mix across the store depending on what product categories you have in the shop.
Okay, and is that the same throughout the whole year? Should I have the same stock turn no matter what month of the year it is?
Your stock turn will vary throughout the year. You'll have periods where it's lower and higher, but if you look at an average, we're typically looking to try and beat 3.
Okay, so that sounds like a pretty tough target. How are we doing? What are the figures for 2017?
Things better this year than they were last year. On average, stock turn seems to have gone from about 2.2 to 2.4. So people are starting to behave in a slightly different way, and they are running typically with lower stock levels, which hopefully in the long run will mean less clearance, which will then ultimately mean more profitability.
Okay, so stock turn of 2.4 this year. So that's great. So we're still buying too much stock now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Most guys, the average retail shop, I think, has probably got 10 to 15 grand's worth of stock that they could do without, and they could then reinvest that money into fittings. They could reinvest that money into service. They could reinvest that money into maybe having different product categories in the shop on top of what they've already got.
Okay. Brilliant. So that's stock turns. Hopefully that's made it a little bit clearer to everybody. So let's have a look a bit more of the detail. For 2017, what were the best and the worst performing groups?
The best performing groups was trolleys, and that was up at 5.5, which is great. You know, people were getting in demo trolleys and selling them out. The worst performing category, unfortunately, was outerwear. Outerwear had a fairly tough year, especially at the start of the year where it was so dry, and that was down at 1, which isn't great. Balls and irons were other categories that were above 3, which is good. Woods, the biggest category, which accounts for 17.5% of sales, was about 2.4, which I think can be improved with the way that companies have now come up with the adjustability. You don't need to stock as many items, so I think you could get woods over 3 as well with a bit of smarter buying.
Okay, excellent. So, stock turns done. What about some overall winners and losers for 2017?
Okay, so probably the biggest winners were trolleys and putters and men's tops.
Okay, and when we say winners, what do we actually mean by that?
Really, I'm just talking about they grew faster than the other categories, and typically they will have had both unit and ASP, average sales price increases.
So, what about other winners then?
Well, irons and woods both did well in terms of value. They were both up quite a lot, but interestingly, both those categories saw quite a drop in unit sales.
Any thoughts on that? Why do we think unit sales are down?
I think a number of reasons. I think one of the main reasons is the replacement cycle.
Replacement cycle? What does that mean?
I mean, it's basically the amount of time that people take between buying new products. So typically they used to wait 3 years between buying a wood. Now that's probably stretching out to 4. Right. Again, with irons, that's a similar thing. Effectively, because people are getting custom fit, they get a better product, it fits them better, it works better. And so now there needs to be a more significant technology jump in order for them to then get any benefit to moving to a new one. Or either that or painting it a nice colour.
So what are the thoughts on sales price up but units down?
Yeah, well, obviously that's going to have an effect. Demand and supply elasticity. If you put sales prices up, it usually does drive units down.
Mm-hmm.
Another reason, especially in hardware, for the drop in units is purely the fact that the set makeup has changed. You no longer have 9 irons in a set, it's 6 or 7. So naturally, if you buy a set of irons, that's dropped. And hence why actually in the hardware category, the wedges have actually increased somewhat. Also, we've seen the same thing in woods. You used to buy a driver, a fairway, and a couple of hybrids on top of your irons, but now people are buying hybrid irons and they're buying hybrids as part of a set, and they're just generally buying less clubs.
Okay, and what about other winners then? What else did well?
Well, we talked about the trolleys. They were the main one, and the interesting thing about them is they grew significantly in ASP. They're up nearly 15%, and they grew quite strongly in units. They're up about 10%, which was a real win.
Awesome. Okay, so we have to do it. What about the dirty down low life losers?
The only real low lifes this year was probably ladies' shirts. That was down 7.5% in value and 7.5% in volume, so that had a real pummeling this year.
Not good, not good.
No, the ladies category struggled a bit. However, if you look at take a step back and look at ladies' clothing overall, ladies' tops and bottoms got bigger. So that was good for some people.
Excellent. Okay. Fantastic. So we've gone through some overall sales values. We've gone through some stock turns. Hopefully we've made that a little bit simpler for you. And obviously the best and worst performers for 2017. So hopefully that's covered the main things for 2017. Where does that leave us moving forward then? So what's the plan for 2018? How does that affect what I do for this year? What are we looking at for?
Okay, well, if we're sitting down there and we've done our budgets, we need to factor in what's happened for the previous years to whether we think the market trends are going to carry on. Are we going to sell more in volume? Are we going to be able to sustain more increases in ASP? The other thing that you need to look at is what's going to happen in 2018 in terms of sales performance. We had a very fast start to 2017 because the weather was great at the beginning of the year. If we don't have that again this year, then we could see sales values down. The other thing that we also need to factor in is we've got a World Cup this year, and that always tends to have an impact on sales figures, usually reducing them as people are watching football at the weekend as opposed to playing golf. So I'd allow maybe a slight dent in the midsummer figures for some of the products, or alternatively, what we could do is we need to make use of that kind of activity and try and entice people into the club, even though that's going on around them.
So it's looking at how ways of increasing sales with it on, but also then reviewing what's dropping at that time of year. So
Yeah.
when is it? June. So it's looking at what stock's going to be around that time.
So we should have, all the fashion shirts should have been out. Bigger sales of irons and woods will have already happened. We just got to be conscious that we take advantage of the April, May time, beginning of June, to get those big value sales out. The June, July, August time is more consumables, is more summer clothing. It's a slightly different mixed product. So.
Right. Okay, well, thanks, Phil. I think that's been very enlightening. So,
Cool.
it's been a good session. As I said, we're going to do these every month now, so do keep tuned. In the meantime, if you've got any questions, if you want to discuss things, if you want us to discuss things for next time around, so do tweet us on @CrossoverTechnologies, or @CrossoverTech. Get in touch with us, and hopefully we'll put you through. Otherwise, have a great month, and we will see you in 4 weeks' time. Take care.
Cheers.